Hello, welcome back. We are 4 Struggling Filmmakers. My name's Emma. Joining me is Noah.
Hello everyone.
Jimmy.
Hello everyone.
And James.
Hello.
Hello everyone. Does anyone have any film recommendations for this week? Or I believe there might be an anti-recommendation.
There certainly is an anti-recommendation. I do have a recommendation as well, but we'll start with the negatives. Formula 1, Drive to Survive, Series 3. Weeks I've been eagerly anticipating the third instalment in the much critically acclaimed Formula 1 Drive to Survive Netflix series. And boy, it's a disappointment. I watched the whole thing in 2 days. That's nearly 10 hours worth of episodes. I think it's suffered a lot from COVID, of course. Like, everyone's sick of hearing about COVID. There's a lot of COVID stuff in there. Like, I really wish they hadn't bothered, but there you go. Or at least just done it in one episode, but they keep going on about it. What they decide to focus on is really random. Like, Pierre Gasly winning at Monza should have been like the highlight of the series, and they barely talk about it. We don't see George Russell's disastrous day with Mercedes. That should have been massive. There's nothing about Nikita Mazepin touching a woman's boob. I think it just misses a lot of the point. The actual racing footage wasn't as exciting as any other series. The interviews seemed like they hadn't got enough that was in context, and that they just had to edit it so that it looked like it was in context. It just seemed like such an incoherent mess of a series in a lot of ways. So if you're looking forward to that, don't.
You know what I'm going to say. Alphabet Month, I'm doing it this month. Every day of March, I've been watching a film correlating with the letter of the alphabet. And recently it was the letter O, and I watched a film called Oculus. It's a Mike Flanagan. Well, I expected it to be a horror film, but it's much more of like a paranormal thriller.
I've seen it.
Yeah, that was yeah.
I went to the cinema. I think it's got the woman from Doctor Who in.
Yeah, it's Karen Gillan, and that's the only person I know in it. But I think it's done very well. I expected it to be one thing, and what it turned out being was arguably better, because it really messes with your perception of what's happening a lot of the time. To give a baseline of what it's about a cursed mirror, and that's all I'll say. Just go in blind. It's not that long, and it's fantastic. I thought it was a really nice surprise for this month.
I saw a film called Skate Kitchen, which is a film about some girls that skate. And that's basically it, really, but it's just a really good sort of coming-of-age film. The director is a lady whose name escapes me. It's Crystal someone. But yeah, so if you like skating and you like hangout movies, it's one for you.
Jimbo Part 2, enough of the anti-recommendations, which there must be an easier way of calling them that. But yes, I have put myself through the 4 hours of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And you know what? It's pretty damn decent. It's coherent. There's loads of backstory about characters. They're well developed. They have motivation. Visually, it's obviously very stunning, really. Like Zack Snyder with a camera in it. Much more coherent story, completely redesigned bad guy. Darkseid's in it. It's just in it. Loads of little DC things for all the fans out there, like the Atom and Martian Manhunter, and more spoilers. It's just much more focused, much more grounded, tonally far more consistent. Good fun. Superman doesn't say the justice line anymore, so that's better. Yeah, really very decent. Really almost Marvel level of storytelling.
Moving on, this week our topic is about video game to film adaptations. We're going to do it as more of a general discussion like we did when we had good old Peter Nelson back on. So to begin with, we're going to do a little run through of the major films that were games over the years. So strap yourselves in, get ready, because here we go. Starting 1993, we have Super Mario Bros, which received 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. 1994, we had a fairly successful year. We had Double Dragon and Street Fighter. Not not doing great on the ratings there. 1995, we have Mortal Kombat. 1997, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Then we move into 1999 with Wing Commander. 2001, we have our very first Lara Croft Tomb Raider. 2002, our very first Resident Evil. 2003 brings our sequel to Lara Croft Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life. 2004, we get our next Resident Evil Apocalypse. 2005, we have both Alone in the Dark and Doom. 2006, busy year, we have Blood Rain, DOA, Dead or Alive, Silent Hill, and then we move into 2007, we have the very first Hitman, House of Dead, In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale, Postal, and then our third installment in the Resident Evil series, Resident Evil Extinction. 2008, we have Far Cry and Max Payne. 2009, just Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li. Is that how you say it?
Chun-Li, isn't it?
2010, we have Prince of Persia, Sands of Times, which I actually didn't know was based off the game. We also have Resident Evil Afterlife. 2012, we have Resident Evil, surprise, Retribution, and the Silent Hill Revelation. 2014, Need for Speed. 2015, the second Hitman Agent 47. 2016 brings some hope that gets dashed quite quickly with Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil, The Final Chapter, thank goodness, and Warcraft. 2018, we have the remake of Lara Croft, just Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and Rampage. 2019, we have Pokemon Detective Pikachu, and then 2020, we have Sonic the Hedgehog. However, in this list is not mentioned Angry Birds, so I will now do a special mention for Angry Birds, which came out in 2016, and then Angry Birds 2 came out in 2019. According to Rotten Tomatoes critics rating, all of them receive an average of 22.9, with the worst receiving only 1%, and that was Alone in the Dark. And then it's kind of like post 2018, we start to get higher ratings with the Lara Croft remake, which received 52%, and then the highest rated so far was the Pokemon Detective Pikachu movie. So that's kind of like a brief history. Basically, between us, we've all sort of seen or know a good knowledge of every film on that list. When it comes to Assassin's Creed, unfortunately, I only watched the first half an hour because it just is so boring. And I know, Jimmy, you have the same thoughts, and I think you saw the whole thing. So I'll let you take it away as to the question, why is Assassin's Creed so bad?
So yes, you did see the whole thing, the whole bloody film in the cinema. It started little. How old was I in 2016? Started little like 17-year-old Jimmy rocks up to the cinema, big fan of the old from Assassin's Creed. I thought it was going to be a bunch of action, well choreographed. We had Michael Fassbender. We thought, yeah, he's the dude, man. He's going to be cool in this film. And then, honestly, I can't remember anything other than being bored. I don't think there's even any action in it, is there? I don't think we spend much time at all in the actual animus. I think, from what I remember, most of the film is people talking about things and not a lot of action. I could be wrong. Honestly, I can't remember anything about it.
The thing with Assassin's Creed, the game, it's a massive world. The map's massive. Like certain, for example, in the Pirates one, you can sail to different places and you can do loads of stuff. So the world is massive and the opportunities are massive. And every time you do something major, like you dive off a church spire or something, there's that cinematic animation that goes with it. And then especially when you kill someone and they have that scene when you kill someone major, and there's like that what would you call it, that cut scene, that doesn't translate to the film at all. Like compared to that, the film is so bland and safe. I think is the big issue.
So yeah, one of the main problems with Assassin's Creed and basically like video game to film adaptations in general is like they focus on the wrong things. Like a lot of the enjoyment from Assassin's Creed is the fact that you get to go around this, vast landscape, kill some dudes and have a lot of fun. And the one thing that people don't like about those games are the story, because they're not very good. And the film obviously decides to focus on the story, which is arguably the weakest part of the film. And so when they try to adapt it, there is possibility that the plot of Assassin's Creed is not bad. Like you go back in time in your mind and then you kill people in the past. It's interesting, but it's just the execution is like nearly 1-to-1 with the first game. The first game wasn't very good anyway. So when they just decide, oh, that's the starting point, let's use that as a springboard to make our big franchise, it ends up falling on its face because it was never really that good to begin with. With a lot of these films, you've got games which don't actually have a lot of substance that they can add to, and then the stuff they add isn't interesting. Like you've got, obviously we'll talk about Mario, we've got like Mortal Kombat, Sonic, all of these games are very linear and simplistic in like their first entries, and then from that they can, in the film, you know, adaptations, they can do more stuff because there's more freedom with just a simple idea than there would be of just like, here's a game that has a story already, just make that again.
Yeah, I think there's two main issues with Assassin's Creed, one of which is very much an Assassin's Creed problem, and the other one is applied to all of these. The problem with Assassin's Creed is that even when you're playing the games, every time they take you out of the historical setting, you just go, no, please. Like, and then you have to walk around an office for a bit. You're going like, this is Barry, it's his first day of work. Hello. Well, no, that never happens. But you know, like you do really boring, mundane things. It's like, we're an evil corporation and we like doing evil things. And you're like, I don't care. I want to stab Borgias and popes and shit. And then the other problem that's less specific is that these games are written and directed and produced by people who I haven't got a clue how video games work and have never played them for sure. Like, I can't remember which director it was, but there was one for one of these games who says, I hate video games. No, it's Max Payne. He said, I hate video games. I don't understand them. I don't like them. But what, hey, I'm directing Max Payne. I've obviously never played the game. The executives just don't understand it. They don't understand the appeal. And so they just try and make something that broadly appeals to everybody. And it never works because fans are always unhappy because you don't have the stuff they know from the games, and new people don't have a beeping clue what's going on.
Yeah, film language and game language are two very different things. And even though they look very similar in the way they're executed, the way they actually end up when it goes from like crossover to one thing to another never really works. That's why like video game tie-in movies are never really that good either, because it loses a lot of what's good about the film in the game. And when you do the opposite of taking a game and turning it into a film, a lot of stuff's lost as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think talking about like different languages, like obviously like books to films have always been a thing, and like the natural progression was to bring in this other medium, video games. And I think what's different is when you have a book, you have it's not a book without a story. So the story is very ingrained in that. So it's really easy to pick up and you can work with the visuals. Whereas you've got a video game, you've already got visuals. And the whole point of a video game is putting the player as the protagonist. So making it a film, you take that element away. And I think a lot of these films that we're talking about kind of forget that the player is the main part of a franchise. And I think it's kind of clocked a little bit more, especially with the new Sonic, which I won't go into a lot of detailing because we discussed it a couple of weeks back. But what they did right was they realized that the main part of like a Sonic thing is that you're racing or whatever, you're collecting coins, and they took that away and made it more of an origin story, which I quite like. Whereas, for example, with Silent Hill Revelation, it's kind of like the whole point of that, the what makes it scary is you're playing it and you're fully engrossed in it because you're walking, and so you've got your headset on, whereas in the film you're just like, I don't feel like I'm in here as much. So it's not as effective. I mean, I liked the first Silent Hill, but I didn't particularly like the sequel.
It's the difference between a passive and an active experience, I guess.
Yeah.
Because when you're, that's why VR is so immersive and it's kind of popular right now, because you're like right in it. These games which you can engage with for like 15, 20, 30 plus hours have to be condensed down to like a 90-minute, 2-hour format. So you're obviously not going to get the same amount of engagement with a certain game than you would with a film, because well, a film adaptation of a game, because it will lose a lot of it in the process. It's interesting because like you got like stuff like cinematic games, which games that try to be like films or are film-like in their quality. So you got like Uncharted and Last of Us. Like those are the two main ones that they use as examples. So Uncharted is basically an action movie in game form. So you get to play as the action hero, quipping and shooting and swinging about and having, action movie. It's great. And it's a nice mix between the passive experience of watching like these massive set pieces and an active experience of actually engaging in the action scenes as well. And that's why they're so fun. But obviously, Hollywood has got their mitts on that, and they're making an Uncharted movie, which should be out either this year or next. And it's got Tom Holland as Nathan Drake and Mark Wahlberg's in it and stuff. And I just know from the outset that it's not going to be as good in the slightest, because you're immediately taken out of it because you're just watching stuff happen.
I was going to say, I don't think we've ever actually had it where the film was good. It was just nothing like the game either. I mean, they're all bad, but I think it's harder to make a good one now than it ever has been too, because the story and the voice performances of games now is so much better than it was now. You would think it would have been easier to make a Mario film when they did in the 90s, because Mario doesn't bloody speak. All you can do is build that character and build that world, and they somehow didn't even
messed it up so bad.
How can you upset Mario fans at the time when all they had was like 10 pixels of a... Yeah, exactly.
They don't even use the same costumes, the same like character aesthetics. It isn't a Mario film. The only thing that makes it Mario is his name's Mario, and Luigi Mario, and they're plumbers. That's it.
It was the 90s though, wasn't it?
There's no Princess Peach. It's like they're dinosaurs, but they're humans because they've evolved past the point of being dinosaurs.
Why can't they just exist, man? Why can't they just be...
And then, oh my gosh, the big thing that Toad, like he gets turned into one of those, what are they called? Goombas. What are they? What are they about?
They're nothing like they are in Mario.
If you're going to use the source material and base it solely on the source material, use some of the source material.
The whole fantasy aspect of it, it's just set in the middle of a city and they're two plumbers.
And the fact that Mario is quite colourful, like the game and stuff is quite colourful. This is such a like bland colour palette that I just didn't understand the cinematography behind it. It wasn't a Mario. If you're trying to get away from Mario, don't call it Mario Super Bros.
You would have thought that would have been the end of it there and then, but then it's like Double Dragon saw it as a channel to try and make a worse movie. Little Paul W.S. Anderson given his first feature film, and they're like, right, go make Mortal Kombat. And he's like, because Mario comes out and it doesn't make any money, it's rubbish. Double Dragon comes out and it's like, Paul W.S. Anderson, right, comes out, little plucky Brit, never directed an action film before. They're like, make Mortal Kombat, and you know what? He does a good job. Have we all seen it?
So nope. I haven't seen it, but I know that the game is a fantasy themed fighting game. So a lot of these adaptations are fighting games in a way. So I kind of got the gist.
Mortal Kombat's got everything. It is the main fighting game of all time. In 1995, that came out. I think there'd been Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, and maybe 3, but I think just 1 and 2. And they have very little story in those two. I used to have Mortal Kombat 1 or 2 on Game Boy. You don't get told much. You're in a fighting tournament and you're fighting over something and whatever, and you punch each other. Mortal Kombat the film does a lot with that. It tells you why they're fighting. It tells you what the tournament's about. It builds up the characters, gives them reasons to be there. I think it actually builds a bit of a world. And the fighting sequences are a little bit exciting. All the actors are actually doing their own stunts, which is quite rare. Some of the fights are quite memorable. Special effects, they blow Super Mario Brothers out of the water, I'll tell you that. A lot of it's practical. Like the suit for Goro is a massive, 10-foot tall person in a suit, and it actually looks pretty good. I couldn't tell that whether it was CGI or what when I watched it. Where it does fall down is that they mandated that the film had to be like a 15, not an 18, which is completely not what Mortal Kombat is about. The game is known for being able to rip people's hearts and spines out. That's what Mortal Kombat is about. But aside from that, I like it. I got it on Blu-ray. Fun fact about Mortal Kombat Annihilation, is that it had like double the budget of the first Mortal Kombat, and it's like 5 times as bad, which is great. Mortal Kombat, right, is the only time I've ever seen this in history where the film has influenced the game. Because after that film came out, they did some story stuff, but most importantly, Kano went from being Japanese American to Australian, because the actor in the film, this is a fun fact, the actor in the film actually said, I want to make him Cockney. And so he does this accent, and everyone thought he was Australian.
So while we're talking about like Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, it's interesting because 6 of these like films or whatever are actually there's franchises. So obviously we've got the Mortal Kombat franchise, we've got the Lara, we've got the Lara Croft franchise, we've got the Silent Hill franchise, the Hitman one, and then I know what you want to talk about next. We have the beast of the video game franchise to film, Resident Evil, coming in with 6 films.
And not one of them is good.
So I know, so basically Resident Evil is, you know, sort of a apocalypse survival game, and you're running away from the evils of the pharmaceutical corporation, basically.
It is the survival horror experience, and I don't care what anyone says. It is the survival horror game. It's better than Silent Hill. Silent Hill's a good game, but Resident Evil's better. This is what pees me off so much with the first Resident Evil, is that the first Resident Evil game, whether that's the 1990s PlayStation version or the far superior 2002 GameCube remake, it's so cinematic. So the whole game, unlike usual games, right, where you're either in first person seeing what the character sees, or you're third person behind, in Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3, it's static camera angles. So like they're all the cameras are up there and everything. And it's so great for a horror game because you can't see what's around the corner. So like you're walking to a corridor and there'll be a zombie in front of your face. You won't see it until you change angle. Like, really annoying from a gameplay perspective, but so cool from a horror perspective. It's so cinematic and it's dripping with atmosphere. It's scary and it's tense. And then Paul W.S. Anderson, who's learned nothing apparently from Mortal Kombat, comes and he just decides, oh, it's an action game. Like, the whole point of the first Resident Evil game is that you've got to count your bullets. You have basically no ammo. You're by yourself. That's an important one. It's you and like 2 other incompetent people who you might run into every now and again, up against this awful horror. And also, the whole time you're unraveling this mystery of what the actual hell is going on. And that the film just chucks out of the water. This is the first film that's meant to be the best one. It's just an action fest with Paul W.S. Anderson's wife running around kicking dogs in the face, literally.
Do any of the Resident Evils like do it justice?
Well, I've only seen the first 4, I think, but no. The second one has some okay moments, to be fair, because it starts to bring in characters from the games who we know and love. Like, why would you make a Resident Evil film and not use the characters from the games that people actually like? I'll just say one last thing about Resident Evil. That I have, for years, been saying that I'm going to write a Resident Evil script that is good and decent and brings light into this world, as the first Resident Evil film should have. And I've never done it, but maybe I will one day.
I think the video games are an ever-evolving medium. Like there's constantly new consoles coming out. It's completely changing as we speak, really. And films have more or less been the same since they began. Obviously, technology has improved, and there's more digital filmmaking now than film. They're all in colour, and I think they just can't transfer the sort of the interaction, the immersiveness that you get with a video game onto a film, because a film is very formulaic in that sense.
Do you think that will change with things like VR coming out and technology? Do you think cinema and games will converge? Do you think films will become more interactive?
Well, no, films have always been interactive, but just for different reasons, really. Not the same reasons as video games have, I think. But
I will slightly disagree on a level. I think that the conversation of yes, films and video games are distinctly different and different formulas and language. Yes, fine, I accept that. During my master's, I actually wrote a paper on the convergence between film and video games, and I looked how games are becoming like films and films are becoming like games. Whilst I think a crossover of the two doesn't work, so when you base something on it purely on the video game into a film, I don't think it necessarily works. However, I think if you look at video games and the way they work and the way film works and takes elements from both, I think it improves each one. So for example, the film Bandersnatch, which was the sort of Black Mirror experiment back in 2018, where the viewer or the player, depending on what you want to say, gets to choose the way that the narrative goes. It's kind of like, is it a game, is it a film? It's on Netflix, so it's on a streaming service, so you associate it with being a film. It's done like a film, however, it's got this gameplay element to it.
It's interesting you bring up Bandersnatch because there are games which use that format to a very effective degree. Sorry, I took your point, didn't I? All right. So,
Until Dawn.
Until Dawn, that's a good one. Until Dawn, me and Jimmy were talking about games like Heavy Rain. And one of my favorite games, which does this quite well, is the Walking Dead game. I think The Walking Dead game is probably the best executed, like, sort of mix of, well, it's kind of more TV than film, but it does, you know, they share the same language of like film and game, where you can watch a narrative play out and your actions directly affect what happens in that narrative. A lot of the events of the thing, because you were directly involved with it and you chose for it to happen, you feel a lot of guilt as a viewer and as a player, because I was like, oh, maybe I should have done that. And then it kind of convinces you to go back and change things.
The Walking Dead isn't just a great example of convergence of film, TV and video games. It's one of the best examples I can think of a convergence of multimedia, because it's not just the TV, it's not just the game, it's the comics, it's so much multimedia.
It's a testament to the Walking Dead game that it manages to be a success basically on just its story, because if you break it down, the gameplay isn't very fun, and it's also aged horribly now. Like, you walk very slowly around environments looking at things, and then you click a button to make a decision.
It's a point and click, isn't it? It's just like it's a point and click with a very emphasized story about it.
Yeah, right. It's just so happens that the world is so well built and the characters are so well written that you do actually care. The other really big issue that, again, I think the story massively outweighs, is that it's a game that gives you the illusion that your decisions matter, when really that game always ends with the exact same result, doesn't it?
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. And if in the game you do something early on, for example, you save a character, that character ends up dying some other way.
They'll just die a different way.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you look at, as much as I hate to give him credit, if you look at David Cage's games, specifically Detroit Become Human, that does have massively different outcomes depending on what happens.
I love that.
A lot of the contrived this thing happened here because that happened earlier, but that was always going to happen anyway. But the actual end of the game, there's like 5 or 6 massively different outcomes.
I've noticed that the games that I tend to like the most tend to be sort of these story-based games. I've got a lot of I'm looking at my games down there. I've got a lot of Rockstar games, and they seem to be the company that tend to sort of take a lot of their sort of games like GTA, Red Dead. A lot of their ideas come from movies, don't they? I believe Vice City is all basically the same plot line as Scarface.
On that note, does anyone else think that Man of Medan takes elements from Triangle?
I've seen 1 hour of video and I would say yes.
Because when I was playing it, that's what the vibes I was getting from it.
Yeah, it's like a haunted boat stuck in a time loop, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very similar. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Guillermo del Toro worked on the game. That was really scary, and I think it's called PT.
While we're talking about horror, we have got to mention Silent Hill, because that is, I know we've briefly already mentioned it in mentioning the second one, but Silent Hill is the quintessential horror game. I think I'm fair to say that.
Yeah, it's up there as one of the best.
Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, 2 specifically.
The atmosphere that the Silent Hill game makes is chilling, and I think let's take it to the first film. Whilst I actually enjoyed the film, however, I think it's lacking in the horror aspect. it's not as scary as I was preparing myself for it to be. What I did think that in the opening scene, what I thought really stood out for me is the soundscape is so good. And I thought, oh, this is going to be really, really chilling. And I think especially when you think of a game, you need the game soundtrack is like the score is pretty chilling because sound is what something that makes you scared. And I thought, wow, this can be really good because the soundscape in this opening is really, really good. And then it just kind of wasn't.
Particularly with Silent Hill, you did right. The sound is so important because Silent Hill has such a distinctive soundtrack that really makes so much of the game. I think Silent Hill is probably, I think I'm okay to say this, it's probably the best video game adaptation I've seen, certainly. It perfectly does what many others can't, and it makes it very accessible to new people who've never played Silent Hill and don't have a clue what's going on. And bearing in mind how flipping confusing and strange the story is in Silent Hill, I think that's quite an achievement. But it also has everything in there that fans would have wanted. You've got Pyramid Head, you've got the Silent Hill town. You know, that film has very little not going for it. You're right, it doesn't quite go enough with the horror. I think they were going for a 15 certificate.
Why is it always the Japanese companies that are pushing the boundaries of horror?
Looking at the company, this list we have of these video games to films, a lot of these original video games are Japanese anyway.
Well, Capcom and Konami were both the two, you know, Resident Evil and Silent Hill was the names in horror.
Moving away from horror, I think there's one sort of last game to film adaptation we should mention, just because they're synonymous with, you know, films. But I think we should talk about Lara Croft. I
think there was a time when Angelina Jolie, for some strange reason, was Lara Croft. Like in many people's eyes, as growing up as a kid, being too young to have played the games, but old enough to watch the film, like I thought Angelina Jolie was Lara Croft.
And I'm also exactly the same. For me, in my mind, Lara Croft was always Angelina Jolie, and then you sort of realise that actually there's a more to it than just, you know, Angelina Jolie.
The original Tomb Raiders, they're like adventure shooter games where you go around raiding tombs, funnily enough. And from that, they got adapted into films and they became a lot more cinematic. This is like an action adventure, like in the same vein as like The Mummy, Brendan Fraser, that sort of vibe. And then from that, Naughty Dog made a little game called Uncharted, bringing it back to Uncharted, which was basically Tomb Raider but with a guy, and that he used that sort of similar vibe. And then from that, when they did the reboot of Tomb Raider, the games, they made it more like Uncharted. So it's an interesting loop of, it was a game, then it was a film, and then it was a game which was like a film, and then they copy that again for Tomb Raider to go back to that. It just shows like how different mediums can affect each other and how they end up more synonymous than you'd first think, really.
I'm kind of glad that they made a remake of Lara Croft, though. I think the remake's quite good.
I've not seen it. I've heard it's good.
It's new and it's different. I wouldn't say it's different. I mean, it's still a Lara Croft story, but from my imagination, it kind of takes it down a new angle-ish, as new as you can get when you're making a Lara Croft film. But I think it was quite refreshing, you know, to see someone else other than Angelina Jolie.
Well, they hired a very good actress, didn't they? Alicia Vikander.
Nowadays, compared to like, you know, when gaming was in its infancy, I think games in, you know, the current generation and like generations past can actually provide better storytelling experiences than most films can. Like, obviously you have a lot more time to do so, and a lot of the time a lot more money to make these games. Like, you know, you've got Red Dead 2, I think was like $300 million, and that's like way more than any film, which is like insane.
I think that really good point, James. I think a last note on games as films, we all live in that hope that there'll be that one film that will change all our perceptions and we'll finally have a good video game movie that breaks the curse. Will that film be Mortal Kombat? The trailer looks good. It's got the characters we know and love. It's got the backing of their group. We shall see. We live in hope. And on that bomb, I think it's time for a quiz. So, without any further delay and no change in camera angles, welcome to my quiz that I made weeks ago. I've been waiting for this one for a long time. So, we'll jump right in. Very simple format. It's true or false. thumbs system. We love the thumbs.
Well, this is really.
Folks. And
Look
shut
at
up.
the effort you put into this, Jimmy.
When
Well
he
done this.
actually 3D modelled that question mark himself.
It's really good, isn't it?
Mm.
I'm asking a question and there's a question mark. Well, hey. Okay, let's go. Question 1. There's no practices here, boys. We're thrown in at the deep end. In Mortal Kombat 1995, Sonya Blade is played by Bridget Wilson, but she was a last-minute replacement for young up-and-comer Cameron Diaz. True or false?
Former.
Was Cameron Diaz originally Sonya Blade? It's true.
Oh,
Only
No.
bloody true. Yes, she was all lined up to play. She'd done all the martial arts training, and then she broke her wrist.
oh.
So, yeah. Question 2. Stephen E. D'Souza wrote and directed Street Fighter in 1994, and he wrote the script in just one night. Is that true?
Ooh.
You know what?
Super false.
Street Fighter wasn't very good, so I'm going to say he did that.
Oh.
James has gone with the against the grain. Ugh. We know how that usually turns out. Well, was it written in one night? It was.
Oh.
No way.
Yeah, so Stephen E. D'Souza was in a room with all the fine folks at who make Street Fighter, Capcom, and he said, if I write this screenplay by tomorrow, can I direct it as well? And the Japanese people went, yeah, if we like it. So he went home and he went, and he came up with the script, and the Japanese people were like, oh my god, this is brilliant. This is amazing. This is the best script we've ever read. And they gave him the job.
Wow.
How wrong they were. Dexter Fletcher appears as a side character in Doom 2005, and he was also the director of the film. Is that true? Or is that false? You've all gone false. Of course it's false.
Yeah.
It was somebody else. I can't remember who. Next
It
one.
wasn't
In the Resident Evil films, the main protagonist is Alice, played by Mila Jovovich, despite the fact that character was never in any of the games. Is that true?
Mila Jovovich wasn't in any Resident Evil.
By the way, you mentioned this earlier in today's conversation.
I was trying really hard not to. Well, ha! 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 Yeah, it's true. Of course it's true. What are the odds of that coming up when I made this quiz weeks ago? We talked about it. In Lara Croft Tomb Raider, Daniel Craig plays a British spy called Alex West, who bears many similarities to James Bond. Is that true? Is that false? Would have been just
And
a
he's
few-
in it. I don't know if that was his name.
Oh, it's Emma for false, and then 2 for true. It's false. He was an American dude doing a bad American accent. He wasn't a spy. He was called Alex West. The plot of the Max Payne film revolves around a cop killing demons.
It's not true, is it?
Is
Is
it?
it?
Well,
Well-
he hit this demon.
None of
If
you,
it is, then that's the biggest swerve ever.
none of you guys have seen the film clearly. It is false. In the film, he does fight a lot of demons, but they're like his imagination, not actually demons.
Yeah.
So there you go. Uwe Boll was the original
Oh
director.
my. Not that guy.
He directed most of the films.
Surely not.
It's false. It's very nearly true though. Uwe Boll went to Konami and said, I want to make a film based on your game. And Konami very rightfully said, no. Anybody but you, no. So he got passed out. George Romero was the original screenwriter on Resident Evil, but his drafts were rejected by Capcom for being too graphic.
Mm,
Interesting. That would be a cool thing if it was true. Which
I
is
believe
not.
that.
James going against the grain. It's true.
Oh, no. That's interesting that he actually.
Emma, you might win.
It would have been really good if they'd stuck with that. Question 9. Silent Hill is directed by Christoph Gans. So after directing Silent Hill, he got a successful career making Disney movies.
Oh, he's going against the grain again.
Loves going against the grain. Well, it's only bloody true. He directed
Oh,
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I thought that seems too specific for it not to be true, I think.
I just thought, what a weird, like, career progression.
Alone in the Dark is one of the lowest rated films of all time, but it wasn't a low budget movie. It actually had a $20 million budget.
Hang on. When did it come out?
Don't just Google it.
well, you spelt budget wrong, by the way.
No, I didn't. That's how you spell budget.
Budget.
That's how you spell budget.
No, it's
It's
not.
not.
It's an F.
There you go.
What is
You
it
put an
budget?
H in it, mate.
When does budget have an H in it?
Wait, where are you looking? Oh,
And then
yeah.
there's another budget that's spelled correctly.
The one I was looking at. So, to win today's quiz, will it be James on true? Will it be Emma on false? Ooh.
Ooh.
Always the bride. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
So that was today's quiz. I hope you enjoyed it. It was one of the best we ever had, I think.
You know, yeah, we always expect high quality quizzes on this podcast.
I guess that was expecting too much there, weren't we?
You like the backgrounds? Very specific to each movie. James, any winner's thoughts?
Winner's thoughts. Honestly, every week I just feel bad for Emma. Literally, it's so close every time, and then she bottles it at the end.
Don't feel bad. My best friend's here, so it's okay.
That's another episode coming to a close. Thanks for watching, everybody. It was a really interesting discussion, and that quiz, just prime quality that. So thanks very much for watching. We've been 4 struggling filmmakers. If you continue to stay safe, we'll continue to struggle. Go play some games, guys. They're good.
Has anyone made a quiz for this week as well?
Anyone made a
quiz? A quiz?
Wasn't it supposed to be you?
It was.